Great. So I appreciate being invited for this this meeting, and I'm hoping to spend the next half hour with you just kind of going over some of my experiences globally and locally to give you an overview of some of the things we get to do as neonatologists. Some of the folks, I think you're aware of this because you've had grandchildren, I've heard, in the NICU, and so that's you've been had a personal experience that will be relatable to this. So I'm happy to answer questions at the end, and if as we're going along, if you have any questions, I'm happy to stop as well. So I'll just jump right into this. This baby right here on the first slide is a little baby that I took care of in Uganda, and I'll tell you a story about another baby that came in the same time this one presented. So this baby was a little bit bigger than the palm of your hand. So I get to take care of a lot of different types of babies. And let's see, we'll go here. So this is an image of a mom holding her baby's hand, which is covering her fingertip essentially. And this is a baby that weighed about as much as a can of Coke. So really tiny baby. And so we can take care of babies as early as 22 weeks gestation, and then we take care of babies through term. So some of the babies come out weighing less than a pound. And so very fragile babies that can survive and have a healthy life, but also are pretty high risk in this group for death and also having long-standing outcomes related to brain injury and lung injury. The goal is to get the baby healthy. So we do take care of some babies that are just born a little bit early, but they're not as sick. And then the tiny babies, we want to get them healthy so that they're like this one, where they're not requiring oxygen anymore, supplemental oxygen, not requiring a feeding tube or all the IVs and all the different lines that these babies often need for support. With my job, we get to see a variety of conditions that many folks may not even be aware of. This was a little baby I took care of who had a very high-pitched cry that caught my attention, and it made me concerned for a neurologic abnormality. And the baby had actually had blood clots in the carotid arteries, so that there wasn't blood flow to this baby's brain in the womb. And so literally had nothing but a brain stem, so could suck and breathe and look normal. But when I put a light next to the baby's head, the whole skull lit up because the skull inside there was just water essentially and not a brain. So tragic conditions like this do occur, which makes my job pretty challenging and tough at times. These are some conjoined twins I took care of in Texas that shared a 6-chambered heart, and they lived for around 6 months. We couldn't operate, unfortunately, because of the way their organs were shared. And so this was, 6 months of taking care of these babies. It was devastating when they died, and they were beautiful little girls. But this is a rare condition. We don't see this that often, but so one of the things I get to witness is just a lot of rare conditions. I'll tell you a little bit about my past. So I was in the Air Force for 10 years, and I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan with the Air Force, but living on a Navy base. And we had a neonatal intensive care unit there that served the whole Western Pacific. And so we would often pick kids up in mainland Japan that needed neonatal care, a lot of trips to Guam. And then we covered South Korea as well, but they had really high quality NICUs there. So really, we rarely I did teaching over there, but not so much transports. But as part of my job, we had to fly a lot. So we flew about once a week, picking up babies or taking them across the Pacific for a variety of reasons. So this would be just me and my crew. We had a pretty limited crew and for how sick the kids were. And we would fly 15 hours straight in the air. So oftentimes I might finish a 24-hour shift, get home and find out I'm going to Guam. So you might be up for 40 hours straight on some of these missions, getting the babies stateside or where they needed to be. We flew in aircraft that weren't designed for transport, but they were like the KC-135. It holds a lot of fuel, so we can fly around the world in that. And so it was pretty tight quarters and dark inside and loud, but this is what we were able to use. And so this was a refueling craft as well, so we could refuel jets via the boom right in flight. So that was pretty neat, where you might be flying to Hawaii with a baby and an F-16 would pull up and we would fuel them up. And that's one of my colleagues on the, with the baby in an isolette on some of our transport equipment. This is one of the trips when I was in Guam. I actually had to pick up 3 babies at the same time. So there were 3 ambulances heading out on the tarmac, which was a lot of babies to take out on one trip. And this is kind of, you can see how tight it is within the cabin of the KC-135. And so we're really just cramped in there, 3 isolettes, and then my team. And we certainly do not have a hospital in the sky. So if things go wrong, you have to really troubleshoot them. And that's for probably another time, but lots of adventures in the sky we had. This just shows all the equipment we have to offload. It's a lot of stuff to carry. It's heavy, but this was just part of the deal, getting these babies where they needed to be to get them the right amount of care. This shows a C-17, which is this was a nicer aircraft just because inside was more roomy. And this is just, there's Diamond Head in Hawaii. We'd often be flying to Hawaii to bring a baby there for surgery or things like that. And so that was a 10 to 15, probably like a 12 to 15 hour flight, more closer to 15 from where I was in Japan. And I'm going to switch gears. So when I was in the Air Force, I did a lot of work, as Aaron mentioned, doing global health. And this is a picture from a little one in Cambodia. And so, as you're probably aware of, the resources and the needs are very different outside of the US. And so most babies and children are raised in low or middle income countries in the world. So of the 135 million births per year, only around 4 million occur in the US. So most of them are outside of our country, and most of them are in settings similar to this, where survival is different, and a lot more babies die. And then just some of the challenges are significantly different. So getting a bath in a bucket is pretty normal over there. These were, great trips though for me, just to meet people and work with people from different parts of the world. The kids and the families are pretty amazing. And, for all that they don't have, they certainly do have big smiles. And so, it really opened my eyes, I think, to some of the needs that are out there, some of the opportunities to help kids and make a difference through physically helping, but more so education and other things to kind of enable the people that are there and empower them to allow to give them better care. Along the way, I've eaten some pretty interesting food. I chose not to eat these, were tarantulas. I think I wasn't clear what type of oil they were cooked in, but I've eaten some pretty interesting things along the way, just being in different cultures. But you get exposed to a lot of this stuff, and sometimes you get sick, sometimes you don't. This is just a picture of once again in Cambodia during the rainy season. So I went there, and I have friends all over the world, and I had a friend there doing some local medical mission work. So I visited him to do some clinics, and what were roads were now like rivers or lakes. But it just makes you appreciate, you see these kids in this little grass hut, or this kind of wooden hut, and they're not clothed or anything, but there's the bathroom over there on the left. And it's like, well, how do you get to the bathroom? And a lot of times, they're just gonna, on a normal day, there wouldn't be all this rain. There would be maybe like a cutout area of land that was filled with water that they would use, but that's the same water the animals would use. And so sanitation becomes a huge issue in these areas. And that's why a lot of waterborne illnesses create a lot of death, as well as significant morbidity over there, but very, very limited resources. This is me on that same trip examining a child's heart, and you can see we're sitting in like a foot of water. So everything's flooded everywhere, and people were literally fishing in the streets. So that made travel more challenging. But despite that, families would still come to get seen, knowing there was a doctor visiting. I've done a fair amount of work in Mongolia. So this is more of a middle income country instead of a low income. And the majority of the population lives in Ulaanbaatar, the capital city, but 80% of the population is nomadic. So at different types of the year, they live out in the countryside and stay in yurts or gurs, as they're called. And this was just we came across a shepherd who had a whole group of animals here. And it's a beautiful place. The countryside is just vast and huge expanses of sky, and you can see the mountains in the distance. So it's a very rugged place to live, and extremely cold in the winter. But we did a lot of work there. I did a lot of work related to neonatal intensive care, but we also did a lot of work related to screening kids for heart disease and doing surgeries. These are just 2 Russian-made buses that we traveled across the Gobi Desert in on one of the trips. They did break down, and you're in the middle of the desert, so there's a lot of hope and prayer when you're on these trips that you're going to be okay. This is one of my really good friends, Kirk Milhone. So he's a pediatric cardiologist who was a friend of mine in the Air Force. He's also a pastor who lives in Hawaii. And he was just doing a echocardiogram, screening this girl to look at her heart. So we would screen kids and then find kids that we could either fly to the States to get repaired, or we had a team there that we would work with their hospital and partner with them so we could repair kids while we were there. This is the first girl ever to receive cardiac surgery with cardiac bypass in Mongolia. So we actually introduced cardiac bypass into the country, which is, gosh, it's about 10 plus years now. But previously they would just, when they did surgery, they would put a child on a bed of ice essentially, and then give them ether anesthesia. And then once the heart stopped, they would operate. And they had about a 50% mortality rate. So with our introduction of bypass, we had around 95% survival. So that was nice to be able to help these kids and their families. And so we did over 100 operations when I was there and screened tens of thousands of kids over the course of my time. This is a little baby a little guy toddler. His name was Send, and I spent the whole weekend with him because he almost died on the delivery table. And the whole team had to leave, but I stayed behind in the ICU and took care of him for the weekend to get him through this. The ventilator I used, the instructions were in French, and I don't speak French, so there was plenty of challenges when you're over there. They have a guy in the basement who has to switch the oxygen tank, and so when the tank is about ready to run empty, someone has to run down and have him switch the tank. You know, we would be in the middle of a surgery and the lights would go out or the oxygen would go out. So very different than what I'm used to here in the States. But despite that, this little guy survived, and he's in his little outfit eating a cookie in that picture. And this is just myself and one of my colleagues, Cody Henderson, who's another neonatologist, working with some physicians in Mongolia. I did a lot of teaching them how to resuscitate babies. So I'd bring mannequins in my suitcase and then travel around and do teaching so that they could help resuscitate babies better. And so that was exciting to kind of give them the tools to do that. And this is where we would stay often. So these yurts in the middle of the countryside, which were, we went when it wasn't snow covered, so that made it a lot easier. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about some work I've done in Uganda. So Uganda is a low-income country with a very high infant mortality rate and very limited resources. The country in the past has been devastated by HIV. Conditions, diseases like malaria and other things are very prevalent there. But there is north of the capital city, there's a NICU that a group out of Australia and a group out of the UK helped sponsor. So I've done a lot of work there with some projects. And so we recognized that a lot of babies were dying due to lack of respiratory support. And so myself, and when I was in Seattle, a team of us developed this low-cost bubble CPAP device for about $30 versus like the $3,000 you might spend in a hospital here for it. And after we implemented, which we did over like a 6-month period, we reduced mortality by 30 to 50% just by having this device to let babies breathe. So that was exciting to be able to do. So this is myself with Dr. James, who's the pediatric surgeon who also runs the NICU. We had a test lung that we kind of developed this on and tested all their equipment, and then did a lot of teaching here to the different nurses there. But it was exciting to see the care, like having babies who would have otherwise died and who I'd seen die then survive just with a simple technology we were able to develop. This is a little baby who, like the baby on the first slide, had presented, and there was a mom. I was there for one of my trips. It was a Friday afternoon, and two moms were escorted into the neonatal intensive care unit building by a nurse, both holding blankets, both looking very stoic. They just sat down in a chair. And I walked over, and the nurse informed me that they both had delivered babies the day before. And I kind of cautiously peeled back the blankets, and there's these babies that are in there. And the one on the initial slide was in with one mom, and then this with another. And these babies were very premature. And the one baby survived for 3 days. This baby was very concerning to me. Had been delivered the day before, wasn't breathing right. Mom was like 16. She was terrified, I think. The husband was mad at her and blamed grandma for causing the early delivery. So the mom was essentially by herself. I put the baby on the CPAP device, but this baby was lived for a little bit, but just too sick. But we were able to have mom hold. We got a photograph with her. We had a Polaroid, so we were able to give her that. And then it was just interesting because as her baby was dying, I wasn't sure what the right thing to do was in the Ugandan culture. And I want to always be sensitive to local practices. But the humane thing in my mind was to comfort this mom, especially because she had no one else with her. And so I just put my arm around her, and she started weeping on my shoulders as she watched her baby die. And we just sat there kind of holding each other for a few minutes. And then I turned and looked behind me, and all the other mothers in the whole NICU were kind of standing up watching us, which was really interesting. I don't think they were used to seeing a doctor kind of like put his arms around a mom in that way, but I was hoping it was good modeling, at least for compassion in a country that sees, unfortunately, a lot of death. And subsequent to that, I painted the mom. She's wearing this blue jacket that she'd put up to her face, looking at the baby. And I wanted to kind of capture that moment in a painting that I'd done. So this was just her looking down at her son as he's dying. So with my background in these experiences in global health and having taken this job here in Madison, I've done a lot of research in the past related to brain and lung injury, as well as a lot of global health work. And I wanted to make sure I continued in the Madison area to focus on areas which I thought were important for neonatal care. And so there's a number of projects, many that aren't even listed here, that I work with different folks within the university. And I do a lot of international work as well with teams all over the place that we collaborate. So there's work that I've done with a lot of students as well. So medical students, undergraduate students. So there's some medical students that we've done a number of projects in Uganda looking at how prenatal education is, and then the use of herbal medicine, which is very common there, to look at the safety of that and how that might impact the pregnancy. I'm working with a team of students, undergrad, working on a solar-powered air filtering device to decrease airborne particulate matter that results from cooking biofuels on stoves, which is really common. So I've been able to partner with a lot of students on some projects. I'm focusing on racial disparity work, and I'm going to get into this in a bit more, it's a huge issue in Wisconsin and Dane County and throughout the US. I continue to do work with neonatal encephalopathy. There's a spelling error there I just noted. But this is a condition where the baby doesn't get sufficient oxygen or blood flow at the time of delivery, which occurs at about 3 per 1,000 births in the US, but around up to 100 or 120 per thousand in some parts of the world, can cause a significant amount of death or morbidity. And so that's been an area of my research for the past 10 years, is working in that area. And then I'm also doing work with virtual reality for training folks. So I'm working with a local company on a project related to that. And then also on an international work, partnering with UCSF, Stanford, and then groups in India, Singapore, and Japan and South Korea, using machine learning to try and improve care. So this is just an image of two students that I've worked with here, Akshith and Kara. And Kara's hopefully graduated and going to have a job soon. So we were funded through the Wisconsin Idea Fellowship Award, and I have a doctor friend in Tanzania, but this is the way they cook in these huts, and they get very smoky with lots of particulate matter, and that's where the kids are and the family are. So we try to develop we're in the midst of developing a prototype for a solar-powered air filtering device that they could use in the home to improve air quality. Fortunately, we have been getting some recognition over some of the local issues regarding the huge disparities with racial inequities regarding survival and outcomes. And so unfortunately in the US, particularly in Wisconsin, if you are a Black baby, your chance for survival is very different than if you're a white baby. And the thought is a lot of this is due to certain stresses that Black women face related to racism and a number of other factors that affect social determinants of health. But that's one area that some of my colleagues and I just published this last Friday. We had this paper come out actually looking at the infant mortality in Wisconsin, which is much higher than almost threefold higher than if you were a white baby. And so, they're not just numbers, they're actual kids. And so thinking of like the actual babies and how we want to let all babies have the best outcomes. So we've looked into some potential contributing factors that might be the cause of this. And so there's ongoing work in this area to try and elucidate what those are and then figure out how to address them. It's likely a multifactorial, there's multifactorial causes to why these kids aren't doing as well, but there are some low-hanging fruits, I think, that we can recognize. And if we think of like our state, this is just a map looking at infant mortality for infants, non-Hispanic Black women. And if you look, Wisconsin's the worst of all 50 states. So our Black infant mortality rate is similar to what it is in Syria. And you think of the wars and stuff going on in Syria. So this is an area we absolutely want to improve and focus on, and not something, I don't want to be ranked the worst in that. So one approach that I've taken with this is to work on improving breastfeeding rates. So we're also one of the worst states, along with Nebraska, for exclusive breastfeeding for Black women compared to white women. And so when I looked at the data at Meriter Hospital, white babies were at discharge, about 84% were exclusively breastfeeding, but Black babies, it was only 57.7%. So pretty significant difference. And so I got a grant through the Meriter Foundation, and they funded, so I'm working with the Harambe Village doulas here in Dane County. And we've got a project where the doulas partner with moms that are Black and then can give them care early in the pregnancy. They can be there for the delivery, and then they can provide care once they go home as well. So it's a very comprehensive program that's resulted in our numbers now in that group are they're similar to what the white babies are. So that's been a real successful program that we're hoping will get, after we publish our data, will give us more credibility, and there could be more support in Madison and statewide for doulas for these women in need. And then this is just a painting I did to try and it's called The Beauty of Breastfeeding, just to highlight, in women of color, breastfeeding is important and it's a joyous thing and they can really help their babies. So I try and use my art as well to align with my passions towards improving care with research. Because at the end of the day, it's the mom and their baby, but it's the father and it's the families. And so everybody's impacted by when one of these babies die. And I think we just want to keep taking it back to like, I think a lot of these people on this call, you have children or grandchildren, so you can relate to how valuable your child or your grandchild is. And so this is another painting I did. This was just a baby who got, this was to show these kids being separated at birth due to COVID. And, fortunately, we're not seeing much COVID in babies, so that's great. Pregnant moms are still affected though, but COVID's had an impact on, across the board, I think, for us for healthcare. And then finally, this is the delivery suite at Meritor, the operating room, and this is actually a virtual image we did. So we recreated the hospital setting using virtual reality, and we have, my goal is to make essentially like a virtual hospital where you can go into rooms, there'll be patients, you have to wear the eyepiece for this. So that's Oculus. We use these where you kind of put on these goggles, but then you're in this room and you can hear things and see things, and it creates a real life experience, but it allows me to train people in a kind of high fidelity way, including I could train someone anywhere in the world, provided they had the equipment. So I could be on with someone in Iceland and Uganda at the same time, and we could all be in the same space. So that works pretty exciting, I think, for its potential to really help train people and bring people together. So I'm gonna, I kind of flew through a lot of stuff, but I'm anticipating maybe there'll be a question or two, so I can stop there. And I'm happy to talk about answer any questions you guys might have.
Great, thank you, Dr. McAdams. That was awesome. So we have about 10 minutes left, and if there's any people that have questions, looks like Lori has a question.
Sorry to ask, but my brother is a retired lieutenant colonel and works in special operations, and he went to Mongolia, different things, and I'm just wondering if you knew Ronald Schwartz. Anyway, I'm going to talk to him, this week.
Yeah, I'm not, I'd have to see his face. It's not ringing a bell. We had big teams though, and I had, it's a small world, especially with the military. So we did it. It depends if he went with the military versus with a separate group. So the group that I went with was a lot of military folks, but we went kind of on our own dime and not with the military. So sometimes the military would get involved, like I did work with them in Peru, but a lot of these other things, they would give me time to go, but they didn't necessarily pay for it or, anything like that. So
that's what I was wondering. Is I asked him about, I was glad to hear our military humanitarian kind of like they training exercises, and then they would do lots of things that were incredibly helpful in areas. But that's a great way for us to go, using military to train.
Yeah, I mean, they have such capacity with, with distribution of supplies and then with the right aircraft, so they can do quite a bit that other groups have a harder time achieving.
Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Yeah.
We have a question in the chat, which is what led to your medical specialty?
That's a good question. I think, long story short, I guess, growing up, like why did I even become a doctor was like a different reason. I think I worked for mowing lawns and doing yard work for a lot of doctors. And I'm like, wow, they seem like they have people get sick, so they have a stable career. And so like, that was an initial interest, but then I worked in a burn unit in college and really for the right reasons. And I think wanting to care for people in need. In my pediatric training, when I did neonatology, there was a lot of encouragement from the neonatologist that I should go into neonatology. And then I was offered a moonlighting job when I was when I was in my chief year. And so when I did that, I think just through a lot of positive feedback and encouragement, it made me go this direction. I think folks, and so I actually try and whenever students reach out to me, I always make time for them. Like I'll spend an hour talking with them because I think an encouraging conversation can really help set the stage for a career path versus a discouraging one. It's amazing what a negative conversation can do to folks. So I think in medicine, unfortunately, some of the rotations you do, if they don't go well or people aren't as friendly, that can dissuade you from following a path in that direction. So with pediatrics, it was really positive experiences with families and with the doctors, and then same thing with neonatology. So I like all areas of medicine, but I've been really blessed to do this.
Nice. Adam, Pack, you had a question too?
Yeah, no, fantastic presentation. I think just trying to balance the, tragedies versus the small miracles that you see is incredible. One of the things I was curious about is you're probably pretty sought after as an American doctor. Are there other doctors from other countries as well? And more so country-wise, like what other areas are sought after for your services or for their services?
Yeah, so, one of the things, when I was in Seattle, I felt like something that should have been done, and I have a lot of ideas. Some I didn't pursue this one, but I thought, there is a lot of overlap. So when I would go in Mongolia, I'd find out like, oh, there's a team from Japan coming, or there's a Korean team, but there really wasn't good coordination, knowing like who's coming, what are they bringing, what are they doing. I thought there certainly could be more of a global kind of calendar for folks to kind of know how to partner better with different groups. But the teams that come in and do a lot, surgical teams anywhere can make a huge difference. You think of like cleft lip and palate repair, but heart surgery. So surgical care, which is, it can be life-changing, but yeah, there's absolutely teams from different parts of the world that would, I think, come in, mainly high-income countries who would be able to afford that and bring in different teams. Things have gotten better, I think, to avoid medical tourism. So you're not just going to kind of like almost have it be a vacation trip or just see stuff. You're really going with the right intentions. And a lot of my work now is not going so much to actually physically do work. It's really to teach and to partner and to have relationships, because I want to empower them so that when I leave, they've learned some things where I can help them, and I want to learn from them. So I try to go in and not have I'm here to save the day attitude. It's like, I'm here to listen and learn and partner and work with folks. And that way I can meet them where they need to be met. And so there's a lot of, I think, lessons learned with that, but certainly a tremendous amount of opportunity. And that's why some of the international work I'm doing now with like machine learning and other things, where India and all these different areas that we have contact points, hopefully can do a lot of good that'll touch thousands and thousands of lives, kind of a bigger, like, I think every child matters, every baby that can be saved, that's so amazing. But if you can really save a huge percentage of the population, that's kind of where I'm at now, is like, how do I make a bigger impact by partnering with people?
Fantastic.
And then we had a question about your artwork, which I think we probably are seeing behind you as well. Do you exhibit it?
Yeah, so most of my stuff, I was pretty naive when I first started painting. So when I was in medical school, I did some painting as a kid, and I liked art, but I took my grandma to Michael's, and I used her senior citizen discount, and I bought like $500 worth of paints, and I built a studio in my mom's basement. My brother and I painted, and the first painting I did got on the cover of a magazine. So I was like, oh, this isn't that hard. And then I lived in the Bay Area, and it was a total wake-up call. I was so naive. I had like my little book of my paintings, and I would go into these galleries, that had like, Picasso's and all these like, famous Matisses and stuff. And I would bring my stuff in there, and they would just like look at me like, are you crazy, kid? And so then it dawned on me, like, why am I painting? What's my purpose? And I felt like I should really paint to kind of call out some of these issues that are out there that I'm seeing, and then raise funds to help others. So like nonprofits, orphans, things like that. And so what I did is I came up with kind of a strategy that every time I paint, I'll usually write a piece that accompanies it, like an essay or a poem, and then get that published in a magazine. So probably for the last 12 or 14 paintings, I've had those all published, with the hope that then there'll be enough out there that I'll get enough momentum and have a portfolio that's been kind of vetted by getting published, that could give me the ability to kind of, in a more formal way, have a website in a way that people could go online, and I could partner with other artists where they could pick a print that they wanted at a reasonable cost, like let's say $100, $200, get that print, and then pick a nonprofit organization that they'd like to donate the profits to, whatever money was left over that did outside of shipping. So I don't want to make money off my art. I really want to help others. I feel like it's a gift I've been given, a talent, and I enjoy doing it. And so a lot of my more recent work is related to like social justice issues and things like that, to trying to call out issues. But it's been good. I think the last few years, there's been a lot more momentum with getting some of the things published and being contacted. So hopefully if I continue to paint, that'll grow and I can help some people that way.
Very cool. Other questions? Oh, Jackie?
Do you have children of your own?
I do. I have an 8-year-old son, Lucas, and a 12-year-old daughter, Mariah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, because it's been a wonderful presentation.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
I have a question. You've addressed it a little bit. Maybe what as the potential good thing that might come.
We're having at least I'm having a hard time hearing
Yeah.
your question, Lori. I think it was
I couldn't
breaking up.
hear either.
Sorry,
Maybe
The
put it in the chat.
in terms of the pandemic, what, if anything, do you see as potentials that will? I heard you say, more coordination of some things. Is there anything that you see as a huge highlight that's come from the pandemic that is a potential for growth and positives?
Yeah, I think we're all like a little excited to leave this year right behind, but I think there's certainly been lots of learning from this experience. I think with some of the inadequacies, I think with our healthcare system and the public health sector that will be addressed. We've gotten much better at communicating like we're doing today through Zoom. I think that will share a lot of, I think, travel time and unnecessary time in future meetings where, it's going to be great to see people in person, but then there's a lot of capacity for education and teaching like throughout the world by using venues like we're using right now. I think the tech and the telemedicine has been really pushed forward. So, if you're a patient and you need to see the dermatologist, why not just get on Zoom and have them look at the rash instead of using half your day to get to the hospital? So I think for a lot of us, including myself, if you've had any healthcare issues and you have to, what it's like to kind of wait in line and go to the hospital. I mean, some of that's necessary, but some of it's not. So I think there'll be some improvements coming out of this from that perspective. I think it's been absolutely amazing that we literally have a vaccine already. I mean, this is the previous fastest vaccine was 4 years in development. It's literally being administered right now is just phenomenal. So I think that's also shown what companies can do with the right amount of resources. And so there'll be a lot of silver linings from this. So there's going to be a ton of lessons learned, a lot of questioning about things, but I do think it's like any other adverse situation when there are some good things that come out of it and lessons learned. So there is concern on my part on a global perspective, and also here in the States for some groups that were disadvantaged going into this, they've become more disadvantaged because of the pandemic and the lack of resources and money and things like that. So I have a high concern that, some of the impact of that on people's lives is actually very dramatic. So there's, that needs to be a focus as well as we're recovering.
All right. Well, thank you again. I don't want to go too much further over because we're already a couple minutes past, but I wanted to let you know that we do make a donation in honor of all of our speakers to the Polio Plus Foundation of Rotary. So we'll be doing that in your honor as well. And then to let you guys, the rest of our club members know, our speaker for next week is Abby Cruz, and she is the founder and executive director of the Playing Field in Madison, which is a daycare that serves a wide range of socioeconomic levels, including children that are experiencing homelessness. So stay tuned for next week. That will be on the 28th, and we will also have elections. So I will see you guys all next week. Have happy holidays, and thank you again, Dr. McAdams.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Happy holidays.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
a lot, Dr. McAdams.
Bye.
Bye.